You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast, bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome everybody to the next edition of the Fezcast, following a weekend down in southern France, which, well, on the face of it, last week we were discussing what we wanted to see, weren't we, Duncan, which was a bit of a competition. And actually, I think, to be fair, for 30 minutes we saw that. But, you know, one of those things, that's plenty to discuss. And joining us on this show is the first ever performance on the Fezcast, someone who I've known for quite a few years, not necessarily through rugby, more through music and the music of Fisher Meridian. But John Farrer's joined us, big Saracen support, and you were down in Toulon on the weekend, weren't you, John?
I certainly was. You know, firstly, thanks for the invite, Jez and Duncan. I've listened to this for many years, so thank you for the invite to come along. I had the pleasure of being down there we went down there on Thursday because the flights were cheaper, not because we could spend another day in sunny south of Côte d'Azur. But no, it was a very enjoyable, entertaining weekend. I went down there okay, this might not work out exactly how I'd like to work out as a Saracens fan. I'm a realist as much as anything else. But as long as we have a good game, the boys give it a go. And boy, did they give it a go. They certainly did. It was a very enjoyable weekend and kind of topped off with a damn good game of rugby. 100 points is not a bad knock.
Well, no, I mean, if you wanted entertainment value, I think you definitely got it, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's time to just hark back to what we did say last week, Duncan, and bring you in here on this. What we said was, following the Leicester performance, which obviously gave the boys a bit of confidence, we knew that our England internationals were going to be rested. We agreed with why they were rested for this game as opposed to the league games. We've put our eggs in that league basket, as it were, as opposed to the Champions Cup competition. Was it the right decision? Number one, I think so. And number two, what we asked for was a performance, wasn't it? And we did get pretty much a performance, even in the second half when Toulon were just steamrolling us, Duncan.
Yeah, I think it was definitely the right decision. Most of the first half was absolutely brilliant. I was on a train from Tavira to Faro. It's the wife just walking in with a plant there. And with my headphones on, watching it on the phone and going bananas every 10 minutes, which was absolutely brilliant, with all these Portuguese looking at me thinking I was mad. But
it's not just the Portuguese, Duncan, don't worry.
I mean, they gifted us 2 tries, and at times there was the suspicion that maybe, you know, what was going on was the way that Harlequins managed to beat Bordeaux last year and the way that we played against Castres. In other words, they hadn't turned up. But there was still, I mean, Theo Dan had the game of his life in the first half, didn't he? Juan Martin Gonzalez, loads of great performances all over the place. We're thinking, blimey, you know, we're gonna have the pleasure of playing Toulouse next week.
Indeed. Well, I mean, that's the thing you say about Theo Dan, Duncan. I just want to come in there. Last week, I wouldn't say we were critical, but we were worried by his performance coming on. And I think I said it in our WhatsApp group. Some players react to pressure and adversity in the correct way. Other players shed away from it. And Theo's had problems in the past with his throwing in particular. He's never had a problem around the park, John, has he?
Oh,
but
yeah.
He reacted to the Leicester performance by obviously working bloody hard during the week and getting it right.
I think, I mean, that first kind of 25 minutes, the whole crowd was mixed up. Us Saracens fans sitting there saying, are we in a dream? How long is this going to go on for? And the French guy sitting next to me, looking over and saying, we didn't expect this. And then when you see the French players running past, they were looking at each other saying, this wasn't meant to happen. And just
Yeah,
everybody, you mentioned kind of Theo Dan. There was no stopping him. There was an Angus Hall. There was a whole. They decided they were going to go out there, and it was so obvious. We're going to give it 110% for as long as we can. These are a good side, and as the game went on, they showed that they were a good side. Fast, quick hands, speed, and they were just. If we'd have had another 5 players, I don't think we would have stopped them.
no, and I think
That's
also
no
as well.
discredit.
I think also as well. I don't know whether you'll agree with me, Duncan. The fact that we had rested Tom Willis, Amaro Itoje, and Jamie George, would they really have made such a difference? I mean, Toulon are they're top of the top 14, aren't they? They have world class players from 1 to 15 to 23 to 36, whoever they pick. And perhaps that's where we lost it more, is the fact that whereas they could bring on international props on 60 minutes, we were bringing on last month's Championship Player of the Month.
Yeah, Harvey Beaton. That's right. I mean, even in the first half, there were times when they were going forward when you were thinking we can't stop them, and they would score a try. And you're absolutely right that the benches made one heck of a difference. They would bring on an Italian international. We'd bring on Alex Cleary. So it was that sort of game. But we were talking just before this as well. What we're dealing with is that probably you could put a very credible case together that Leinster are better than Ireland. Yes, you'd lose Bundyaki, but you get Bowden Barrett. They're probably better. Toulouse might be better than France for exactly the same reasons. Toulon are probably not better than France, but I put it to you that they would beat Italy, Scotland and Wales in the Six Nations. So we're up against these teams who are international standard, and what the RFU say to us, well, we must play them without our England boys.
Oh.
Now, you might say, okay, that was our choice, but the fact is, it is the rules. We had to rest them either in Europe or in the league. So that choice was forced on us. So us going for the top 4, trying to qualify, trying to win the league, rest them in Europe. Saints, not a hope of getting up there, don't rest their players and beat Clermont. So, that this is what we're up against as well.
I mean, to me, John, I don't know if you agree, it kind of devalues the tournament, though. Either way, I saw a comment. Brian Moore had written an article in the Tory Graph today, which I'd read and I actually found it quite interesting. And thanks to my dad for giving me the subscription, because I really don't want to pay money to them. But, I read it. I agree with an awful lot what he said. And, people look at it and say the French teams can spend more. That is only a small percentage of the problem here. The other, the French teams have the same structures, similar structures to their season, but they don't have to rest the players as often. We didn't have to rest Nick Tompkins, who's had a Six Nations tournament, for instance. Andy Onyama Christie could have been playing for Scotland. We wouldn't have had to rest him because he's Scottish. It's just the English players. But what I'm saying is, it seems daft that Saracens now are going to put their eggs in that one basket of the league in a hope to get high enough up in the league to at least qualify for a trophy that they're not going to prioritise unless things are really going their way next season. I mean, if you're top 2 like Bath, and then you could afford perhaps to prioritise a little bit more and rest different players at different times, then maybe it'll work. But it just seems, we often say that rugby is a game run by I was going to say amateurs, but I think amateurs would do better. People who just have no conjoined thinking. And until they sort out the season structure, until they sort out the fact that probably they play too many internationals, certainly in the autumn, in so much as that, 4 autumn internationals when perhaps 2 would do, but then the coffers don't get filled at Twickenham, do then? There's so much, it just needs somebody, I think. There's too many organisations, whether it be media, whether it be governing bodies, whether it be companies running this, but that they don't seem to be able to find any commonality between them, John.
And there's, I think I've had this discussion lots of times about, they can only play up to 30 matches a year, as an example. So they play 30 matches a year. But the more players you have going off to the international scene, then you as a club get penalised.
Yeah.
And if you as a club get penalised, how do you drive the development of that club if you're losing 10 players throughout the autumn and 10 players throughout the Six Nations? It's great to have them playing for their countries, But how does that deal with club development? Because people want to go and see international. They want to go and see the big players, and if they're not there, they're not going to go and see them. They're not, with all due respect, you're going to get 1,500 people going to watch a Premiership Cup game on a Sunday or a Saturday. They want to see the international players, so they'll stay at home and watch it on the TV. So do you say 30 is too few or 30 is too much? Do clubs then say, well, actually, I'm going to fight all season to get into the Champions Cup, but actually I might be better off and have a better chance of finishing lower, get knocked out of the Champions Cup early and go for the challenge?
Yeah.
Can I just come in there?
Yeah.
Toulouse have got a wage bill of 18 million euros. And they still make money, by the way, because their turnover is 60 million euros. So that's call it 15 million quid. And ours is about 7 or 8 million.
Yeah.
So what happens in France, as David Strettle said, is that a lot of players get rested for away games because you can just win your home games and get into their playoff system for the end of the season. So they do rest players in France, and we're not up against. But you're completely right. Where the battle is between the international game and the club game. And at the moment, the RFU are saying, if you want the money you got of us before, then your England players have got to play less. And what that means is that we lose our England internationals for 2 out of 18 league games. And we have this choice now at the business end of the season as to whether we go for Europe or we go for the league. That is so short-sighted because where are the England players going to come from if the next step is they want even more internationals and then maybe they start being able, as Steve Borthwick wants, to pick Jack Willis or a whole load of players in France. They are playing with the future of the club game in England.
Oh no, they are. Yeah, they absolutely they are. And why they think? I mean. At a very basic level, are people going to say, well, actually, I do want to. It's my job. It's my skill. I should be able to go and earn my living where I want. And for you to say I can't play for my country, is that, I don't know, restraint of trade? Can they say, okay, I know you won't pick me, but how long? What was that Bosman ruling in football years and years ago, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You can't do this and you can do that. So, why tell somebody they can't play for their country unless they play in their country? It's an antiquated rule that needs addressing. That's my humble view anyway.
Well, on the other hand, there's only one reason why Maro Itoje is still in Saracens.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So, the league would not be the league it was if you changed that rule.
No. I think the interesting thing would it's not going to be the people who sit in a stadium that will drive this change, but it will be the media guys because we see bidding wars that the BBC have had to up there for the Six Nations whatever and ITV they've had to up a few more quid there and everything, but TNT Sport are it'd be interesting to see what viewing figures are for games where teams do rest internationals, because the casual fan who won't perhaps go to game, or certainly like myself, he can't get to Toulon for argument's sake. If I'm a casual fan, am I going to turn on knowing that I'm not going to see Maro Itoje and Jamie George and whoever playing for Saracens when, I could watch the football, as you say, Duncan, or whatever it may be, and at the point when it starts hurting TV figures is the point where the change gets driven a little bit more.
The Prem Cup shows, with the attendance and the fact it doesn't get on the telly and the rest of it, it's not what people want to see. Us hardcore quite like the idea of going to see the young players getting a run out and the rest of it, but it's not going to bring in the audiences.
It's not. If you think that where Saracens ground is, you've got Toulon as an example. It's based in the city. I didn't walk more than 10 minutes anywhere from that ground over the weekend to have everything I wanted, and it's easy to get to. Saracens ground, and it's a lot. I like the ground. I like what we get when we go there, but it's not going to build itself into the community. It's going to struggle to build itself into the community around there. So where do you get the fans from? Where do you get? I don't know.
I don't necessarily agree with that. Yes, so if you had something smack bang in the middle of London, it would have a big advantage. But those shuttles and everything work well, and it is building its way into the Barnet community. It got a huge low interest loan from Barnet Council to build the West Stand, so it is making its way into the community.
Just getting there, it's just getting people to see that and kind of.
I mean, the big problem it had is I saw this. If you the RFU have got this. If you put a red dot everywhere where somebody's bought a ticket to go and see England or gone to Twickenham, then the West London, Chiswick, and all that area around Harlequins will be scarlet with the number of people who go to see England rugby. Barnet is white.
Wow.
And we're also in the shadow of Tottenham and Arsenal and all the rest of it. And you go past the Power League as you walk into StoneX. And only about, I've seen this again before, 4% of a population generally, and there are exceptions to this, will go and see a sporting club regularly, you know, with having the time and the money to do it. If you're fighting for that 4% with Arsenal and Tottenham and Chelsea and Watford and the rest of them, it's not easy.
No, and it's quite interesting as well. And I'll point this one out is that the area that we find ourselves in is quite culturally diverse, in so much as there's a large African, West Indian population. We've got possibly the most high-profile black sportsman.
Wow.
It's only probably Lewis Hamilton who's higher profile than Maro Itoje, the England rugby captain. Yeah, if you look around StoneX on a game day, it's us. It's white, middle class.
Yeah, it is.
It takes generations to build this up.
But if you cannot build on through whatever fault, the fact that you've got the most high profile in a cultural group playing for your team, and you can't attract those people to be like him, it's crazy.
There's probably, maybe there's more that could be done with Maro. I mean, let's not belittle, building a high school in Graham Park. You walk through Graham Park and see how many white faces there are. It's not a lot. No. And that is just a way of actually those young kids actually knowing what rugby is.
Yeah.
Because I've done volunteering in schools in Ali Pali and all sorts of other areas. They don't even know what rugby is.
No.
And a lot of that.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to, I mean, when I was a kid, we had a battle like anything to play rugby at our school. We were a football school, and it was, to get to play rugby was a battle and a half. And I think that's, again, what you're having in different areas, the perception of the game as a whole. There's so much.
If I can bring that back to the problem in hand, as I say, in Perpignan, which I really know about, they don't even bother knowing what football is, because it's all rugby. And the local rugby team is almost like the national team for the French Catalans. And it's the same in Toulouse. It's the same in loads of other towns.
But that's ingrained. That's the difference. That's ingrained, isn't it, Duncan? It's ingrained in the culture there.
Yes, totally.
Grow up with rugby as your first sport and football and whatever as second and thirds.
And that's why you get the local sponsorship. That's why you get the TV deals. And, we've got to try our best. In the meantime, what can we do? Do we withdraw from Europe? No, we don't do that, do we? Even if there's... And remember, we had a period when we had a sugar daddy who, whenever certain players' contracts were up, he gave them half a house for guaranteeing a mortgage. And for doing that, we managed to build up a team that could compete. Before that, we do quite well in the competition, and we come up against a Clermont or Toulon and get bashed. It was the same before. Except now that we've got this worse situation that at least before we could play our England players.
This is an interesting point you make, though, Duncan, and I think it comes back to, and I think Saracens' success in Europe, which, lest we forget, was on the back of us bending the domestic pay rules at best breaking them, whatever, did paper over the cracks of the fact that English clubs have not been competitive in Europe for 20 seasons, really. Exeter won a tournament when it was COVID period of time, whatever, and it was almost a false result. Not that Exeter would ever take that, but it was only Saracens that flew the flag. I mean, we had the years where Leicester and Wasps were doing well, but there was a much leveler playing field back in those days. So when Saracens were winning, I think there were a few people who were quite happy to turn a blind eye to what was going on because we were winning, and it put English rugby in a better place. And whether that was the correct thing to do or not, but that happened. And actually, if that hadn't have happened, then we would have been having this conversation 15 seasons ago.
You're totally right. But I would like to just emphasize that despite the fact that we were bending the English rules to be able to bring Will Skelton on at 60 minutes, we still had a lower budget than most of the French teams, even if you add in the half a houses and also than Leinster. So it still was an amazing achievement, but it took that to do it.
It did, and also it was that white heat of having a great coaching setup as well that could work with those players and make them more than the sum of the individuals. I don't know if you agree with that, John.
But yeah, I think to a certain degree it does. But do you? The French finances are one thing. We can't compete with those. Should we compete with those? Should we be looking to change the way that our rugby clubs are run to compete with the overseas, the Irish teams and the French? So our top players, stay over here and they play over here, and more people start to watch and play. Oh, I'm going to go and see Jack Willis because he's playing over here now. I'm going to go and see Sinker and Son because he's not playing in Toulon. Do we change the rules over here, or do we say no, we're sticking by these English rules, and in fact, if the finances get worse, we'll drive down the cap even further? And
we've been having this row all week, and it basically you fall into two camps. In my view, if you believe that Father Christmas is coming down the road with 10, they'd have to be billionaires who are willing to lose 10 to 15 million year after year after year. So that after 10 years, they've lost 100 million, and yet they still keep going. If you think those people exist, when Hargreaves Lansdowne, who own Bristol at the moment, are not even spending up to the cap because he doesn't want to lose that money. If you think those people exist, then you've actually got a conversation. I don't think you've even got a conversation.
The one thing I will say on Lansdowne is that you've also got to remember is that he owns Bristol City, and he's trying to build something in Bristol that's not just rugby union based. He's Sporting Bristol, which is an admirable ambition. And I mean, I know Steve Lansdowne personally, having played Skittles with him many, many years ago. So there is that to it. I think what you're looking at there,
to do that.
Oh, he is bonkers to do that, but there has to be a balance in so much as saying that you've, like I shared the article about the Bath owner who's just throwing money left, right, and centre, and which is all well and good until you remember that at any time he can call that loan in with just a year's notice. But nobody will allow Bath to go under because it's Bath. But that's a different conversation for a different time. Yes, there are people out there who want to throw money at it. We've seen it at our club because Nigel Ray has thrown an awful lot of money at it. And these might be the people who are not able to compete with Premiership football, but could do it. But then you've got the other people like Tony Rowe who want success at the cheapest possible price. And I think there's got to be a balance between the two. As in everything in the world, there needs to find a balance. And that balance is probably going to be for far cleverer people than me to work out, but it must be there somewhere. And it's not a case of throwing millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds at it. It's a case of perhaps tightening belts in this area, but loosening them in this area. I don't know, but it's got, for the good of the game, something's got to be found.
Well, I was trying to deal with the first point you made, and now you've made another 5, so I'll have a go at it. The first point about Bath, the reason why Bristol, the reason why they can get large crowds is because the nearest Premier League club's in Birmingham, first off, so he's absolutely bonkers to be trying that. With Nigel Ray, I know that Nigel Ray, because he told me, was trying to create a Saracens brand to build up the crowd so that eventually Saracens didn't need him. to keep bunging in money season after season. So he wasn't there for the long haul. Bath, however, they've got two billionaires who are two. They should share one of them around, but they got two billionaires, being James Dyson and what's his name? Is it Bruce Dixon or somebody who would be prepared? They could afford to put 15 million a year in. So if you do, and are there any others? I don't know. So probably if you do away with the salary cap, the probable outcome is you have Bath winning the league season after season after season like we did. And that is not the way to build up rugby either.
No, I completely agree with you on that side of things. I just think that the important thing is that there is a conversation around this, that we find a way forward, because otherwise, we are going to in danger of sticking our head in the sand and just thinking, oh, well, kicking the can down the road. So, what do you think, John?
I mean, I think if we go the way that we are, where there seems to be the RFU go down the road of saying, okay, that club can't compete, we're going to drop the salary cap. That chases away the players. Maybe you actually think of creating a closed shop. And I know people have discussed this and they've said Premiership becomes a closed shop. And everybody has a part of ownership, and the money goes round and round and round in the Premiership. If you want to then expand the Premiership to let's say a club that's doing really well in the Championship, they buy their way in. So can you generate enough money within the pots rather than just saying we're going to have something where you have relegation and you have promotion?
Well, that's following the model followed by the three most financially secure sporting competitions in the world, which is F1, NFL, and NRL. Just in terms of whether, trying things, the cap is going up by £1.5 million next season, and that will make a big difference. So, we shall see. Yeah, of course, you've got to keep trying it. And actually, I personally believe that managed growth along the lines of a structure like John said, and which has come in rugby league recently, where you get into the league based on criteria like, are you good for the league? What is your footprint? Do you have a good demographic who's going to go to games? Do you have a decent stadium? The rest of it, I personally buy into that. But yeah, you have to try things, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, I think what we do need to do is, because we're in danger of forgetting it, is get back to the game. And we've mentioned Theo Dan. A couple of other players I want to mention and see what your thoughts are. Juan Martin Gonzalez stepped up and showed some real leadership as a pack leader, I felt, on Saturday. And I mean, he had an explosive 25 minutes where he put so much pressure on, didn't he, the French pack? And I know everybody's saying, you said they gifted us 2 tries and everything, but as we've been talking about in a lot of games recently, that comes from the pressure that's put on, in the same way that England beat France and England beat Scotland, when probably they didn't play as well, but just harried and pressurised. And maybe, it was a bit of a case of, kicking sand in the bully's face, wasn't it? It was going to come back and bite you. But, that's the way it goes. But Juan Martin had a superb game, didn't he?
I think he did, Jez. And I think you're right. In that first 20 minutes, it wasn't just about Toulon standing back and saying, whoa, what are these doing to us? We created the pressure. Absolutely, we created the pressure. And we kicked the ball and we ran and we were aggressive. We gave them no space. So I think that, as I said at the very beginning, the young players, I think, stepped up a number of marks on Saturday. They really did. And Theo Dan, wow.
The other guy I want to mention as well, because I think it was very useful. Because one of the things that we've been talking about this season, Duncan, isn't it, is the fact that a lack of incisiveness in the 3 quarters. And I actually think that we may have picked up on a solution here, because a player that you like an awful lot is Ollie Hartley, who played at 12, with Nick Tompkins at 13. And I've always thought that Nick Tompkins is a better 13 than a 12. His best performances for Wales have been in the 13 shirt. And he's had a great performance again first half, playing at 13 off of a really big line break inside centre, Duncan.
Yeah, we've talked a lot recently that Nick Tompkins has looked like the Duracell bunny with some cheap supermarket batteries in him, haven't we? But he's really, in the last couple of games, starting to look like Nick Tompkins, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I suspect, that combination, I've said it before, I like the battering ram at 12. We've got a tradition of it at Saracens, haven't we? And I think if Ollie Hartley's got the makings of that, he's got the power and he's got the size to do it. And I suspect we'll see that he'll add to his game, more offloading at times. But boy, he can take a chance as well.
He can do, can't he? I mean, it was a beautiful run he made and line that he took to score his try, John, wasn't it?
It was
fantastic.
No, absolutely it was. And I think you're right, Duncan. I think, he's got the Nick Tompkins coming in there and Ollie Hartley. I just think they're growing in stature with every game that they're put up against. And when we're putting them up against the bigger players, the bigger clubs, they're stepping up to the mark. And they're showing the potentials that no doubt Mark McCall and to a certain degree a fair number of us are seeing as they come through.
The other thing I wanted to mention was the fact that, and this is our opportunity to have a pop at our friends down in Surrey. I won't call them a London club; they're not. They're from Surrey, but TW3. Danny Wilson came out this week and suggested that Saracens were disrespecting this tournament, which I think is really unfair. At the end of the day, we started this game on Saturday with 9 internationals. And as my dad so wonderfully put it in a message he sent to me, he said, we may have disrespected it, but at least we turned up, which is more than the Harlequins did in their game against Leinster, wasn't it, Duncan?
Oh, definitely. Maybe they should have put out their Prem Cup team again. I mean, they beat us with it, so, but maybe done better against Leinster. But it's a weird old game.
Yeah,
it really is.
I mean, my fear is that, and we're going back to the football analogy, John, and it is the European competition shouldn't be seeing teams scoring 70 points against another top quality side when it's the top 32 teams in that are available for that competition. That's a problem that needs to, and I don't think that Saracens, as I say, Saracens did everything they possibly could and really did put a performance. And we'll go through some 3-word reviews in a minute. Whereas Quins didn't. Quins just were absolute pony, weren't they?
I saw that score coming through and I thought we thought there was a mistake. It can't have conceded 60 points already, surely not. And I think when you looked at the team afterwards, if you're going to say that Saracens were disrespecting the European competition, then what were Quins doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Danny Wilson perhaps needs to concentrate more on what's going on in TW3 than anything in actual proper London. But shall we just go through these 3-word reviews quickly and just see what you think about this? Coldmore Bill, he said better than Harlequins, which, we'll take that one. Waldo Fez, useful learning curve. Fine Wines, John Hammond said lost proud Rose. So I assume that, win, draw or lose, he was on the boost, which is fair dues. Chris Braganza, it is the shadow, lots of positives, and then he put a second one in onto Gloucester. Surrey Rich, fun first 30. Steve, Saracens 971, Steve Cummins, defeated but proud. And the SSA said lost and learned. And Sam Norris, attention to the league. I think that's pretty much what went on that weekend, isn't it?
It was absolutely, Jez. It really was. When you travel down there and you're all kind of meeting up beforehand, and we're saying, "Oh, as long as it doesn't get too messy in the first half, maybe we can hold on." And there was we weren't sure as what to shout. Do we shout brilliant? Do we shout or are we going to shout? Or they're going to come back at us? And are we going to collapse after 20 minutes because the lads are just overrun by brilliance? And they weren't.
No, they weren't. And it's a shame. The shame the game's not 30 minutes a half, isn't it? Because if it was 30 minutes a half, I think the game would have been completely different. Those 2 tries, as much as the obliteration of the second half, those 2 tries at the end of the first half really did change the game. Because I think if we'd gone in half time with that 35-12 lead, was it, at half time, and then forced Toulon into perhaps pushing the envelope a bit further, because going in just a little bit down as they were or whatever, they allowed them to just focus on the process as opposed to second half a bit of blind panic, which could have opened up more opportunities for us. As it was, I mean, we didn't disgrace ourselves second half. We did get a try in the second half, and you know, maybe it's when Toulon had emptied their bench, but you know, I think there's a lot to be proud of there, Duncan.
Well, as Stephanie said earlier, would we have done any better with another 5 players? Well, had we gone in at half time 35-12, which we could have done, and then in the second half you have coming on Tom Willis, Maritoji, Ben Earl, etc., etc. It would have been an interesting game, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't think we're that far behind. I mean, 72-42 gap suggests that we are. I don't think we are that far behind. And as I say, if the a few ifs, buts, and maybes in there, it would have been a bit different, wouldn't it?
What I take away from it, Jez, is that we were in the lead at the 56th minute. We were still in the lead in the 56th minute of that game. And okay, then they got up to 70, but they really turned the screw, and our lads were absolutely buggered. But 56 minutes, we were beating a very, very good side with a lot of players who were rested and a very kind of lightweight bench in reality. So I think they've got everything to be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right there. I think that's, and as I said, one of the 3-word reviews about it being a learning curve. This is a good game to play in so much as that there are an awful lot of players who will learn what it's like to play in a big, big match. And that's why it's important that we do continue to support this tournament, because you will have found out about these players. You'd have found out what their heart is, what their guts are like, what their courage is like. And they showed everything there. And as I say, particularly the younger lads, you expect the big internationals to be able to step up in these games. But kids who've not played internationals, a 19-year-old Angus Hall to play like he did, to the man of born, well done, chapeau.
And so, yeah, absolutely right. Great experience for those young players so that they can become really better players quite quickly, get picked for England, and then we can't play them either.
Yeah, of course, that is the other issue. And as I say, in 5 years' time, this might be a team that will be challenging for finals again in this competition, and also will be helping England get to World Cup finals, because you can see players like Ollie Hartley and Angus Hall have got it in them to be full international. Tobias Elliott, we figure Tobias Elliott now has been a bit of an old hand because he's had such a good season, but this is his first proper season playing rugby, and the 58-year-old Alex Good didn't do too badly either, did he?
No, he did all right. As long as he stopped kicking it miles down the centre of the pitch, if he could just get some experience and stop doing that, he'd be a really good player.
He would be, wouldn't he? Now, the last thing I wanted to point out, and we'll go back to it because there is a bit of other news as well. Just wanted to get your views, and we've kind of touched on the subject already. But the news has come out this week that Worcester Warriors are going to be invited back to play in the level 2 in the championship. The debtors have been paid off, and so they're debt free now. 6 Ways is back being used. Now, I know Duncan's got a slight issues with Worcester not perhaps being the centre of a demographic that's going to support rugby, although, fair dues, they did have similar attendances to us when they were up in.
Didn't. No, they had about 6,000. Look, I've got nothing against Worcester, and I think they'd be a fantastic addition to the championship. It's just that I think it's extremely difficult for a club in a town with a population of 80,000, only 80,000, with Gloucester less than an hour down the road, to get a big enough fan base. And it's also not the richest city, even if they did have as many coming to a game as we did, we have an awful lot of people who can pay hospitality prices, and that gives us a big issue. And as we've been talking about before in relation to us versus Toulouse, I'm afraid money does matter. And I just question whether long term they are really a viable Premiership club.
Maybe not.
Sugar Daddy. There's a sugar daddy sitting in the background.
There was before. It turned out to be a property developer, and this is the
Well,
problem.
yeah, but they had the Duckworth family, didn't they? The Duckworth, Cecil Duckworth did build that up, and I think it's important for the legacy that Cecil Duckworth had as the as someone who worked his life to get Worcester Warriors up on the top table, to give them the opportunity, because it wasn't through the fault of the club that they went under. It was the fault of the people who came in with nefarious ulterior motives that kind of ruined them. And I think that if that hadn't have happened, that Worcester Warriors would still be there, and perhaps not as viable as you say as a Premiership club, but certainly would offer something to the table. And what you've got to remember is that Six Ways One is a really, really good stadium. It is a fantastic place to go and watch rugby, and it's really well set up and everything like that.
I used to love going there, but it does, sorry, last thing I'm going to say on this. Yeah, he had a sugar daddy who built it up in a lot cheaper times, and then he couldn't find someone viable to take it over. Yeah. And if you are running that model, you'll always be prey to property developers.
Oh, you will do indeed. And, the only hope is that perhaps people have learned from that, but that's the nature of living in a capitalist world, isn't it? That, capitalists do what capitalists do. The other thing is that, I've had a big to and fro with someone on Facebook who's saying, well, Worcester Warriors, if they come back, they need to start at the bottom. And I think he was actually advocating that they started playing against Ledbury Thirds in the North Midlands 1 next season, which is absurd. The fact that people cannot get right in their minds the split that there is a professional game, and then there is a semi-pro game, and there is an amateur game. And, level 2 is the lowest level of the professional game, John, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And so as you say, just why do you, we're going to cast you down to the back end of beyond, and you've got to work your way through this and then come semi-pro. Who would put their money into that?
Yeah.
If you want somebody to invest in the club as a business and start it off and saying, okay, right and proper owner here, he's willing to put some money in, there's a good business case around this, they've got a good stadium. Well, he's not going to do that if you're going to sell him. He's got to go and spend 5 years at the back of beyond. He wants some return.
And it's slightly worse than that, because he can come up, spend all that money, he can go down again.
Oh, that is a risk.
straight into financial Armageddon. Yeah. There are it's a difficult subject, this, because there are people who passionately believe that, I call it the law. The law is you must start at the bottom and make your way up through promotion, and it's something intrinsic that they think is morally right. And I would just say, outside of football and French rugby, and we talked about the different conditions that exist in France, it doesn't exist in any elite sport anywhere else in the world.
No, ideally what I would like to see potentially is the fact that you could have a group of 30 clubs that you are split with a Premiership of 10, a Championship of 10, and then a league below that may be semi-pro, with the possibility that if you could go pro, you can move up in the Championship if a team in the Championship needed to come down, whatever. But it's very much not necessarily on playing, but on your ability to sustain and your ability to be part of that table. And if you did that and then turned around to the RFU and said, you concentrate on grassroots rugby and make sure that people who want to play just for the fun of playing on a Saturday can do so, and that they're financially viable, and that these clubs can still have their junior sections that supply players to Saracens, to Worcester Warriors, to Coventry, whoever it may be, then that surely should be the ideal. But as you'll say, Duncan, that will mean an awful lot of turkeys voting for Christmas.
Well, I actually am an advocate, if we could get there financially, of having a 10-team Premiership A, a 10-team Premiership B. It's all fully professional. You have to be professional. All of the central money is split across those two. And you do have promotion and relegation between those two divisions, because you're not being relegated into financial Armageddon, which did for Newcastle when they were relegated and lost 5 million, followed by COVID. You don't destroy clubs with relegation that way. And the other thing that it enables you to do is, in the international windows, you have matches between the two divisions for half the number of points. So in other words, Premiership A, you play everybody home and away, and you play everybody in Premiership B once. and if you win, it can be worth 2 or 2.5 points. And that way, you've got really meaningful matches in the international windows. And because your internationals away, it means you've also got to play your young players as well.
That sounds a viable option there, Duncan. Have you got a backer sitting in the corner there?
I haven't.
Ask the missus to put Randana's back on the sofa, see if she can find a couple of quid, Duncan.
Yeah.
But it's like Jess said, I'm always using the phrase Turkish are not going to vote for Christmas, because the initial reaction of the 10 Premiership clubs will be, oh, we don't want to share our central income with 10 other teams. Well, actually, the way things are going, it's not going very well for you anyway. You've got to do something radical.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, gentlemen, I think we've really had quite a good discussion there. And John, thank you for your time. And if you ever want to come on again, we're more than happy to have you on and be part of the team, as it were. But thank you for your insight and your involvement in this. And I will say as well, obviously, you'd like to say a quick word to Toulon Rugby Club, because they are one of the most welcoming rugby clubs in the world, aren't they?
They looked after us like princes. They really did. They laid on a feast for us in their little tiny clubhouse on Friday night, and everybody was going around for meat and cheese 3 times. The beer was cheap, and they couldn't have been more welcoming. If anybody gets a chance to go down there, they really should.
Oh yeah, and I've seen the pictures of Dave Loxham as well. He seemed to be enjoying himself quite nicely. So there we go. But yeah, no, thank you for your time, John, and thank you, Duncan, for your time as well. And we didn't get too heated, did we?
No, not at all. Not at all.
No. We're still mates, honestly.
Yeah, of course we are.
And can I just say, it's lovely to meet you, John, but for me, you'll always be Stephanie.
Okay, you're so kind. I'll change next time. Night, guys.
Well, thank you very much for your time there, and everybody. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll speak to you again next week. Where we don't know what's going to be going on next week, because there's no rugby, obviously, because we're out of the competition. There's nothing to do. So, I mean,
well, a little plug. This will be going out on Wednesday. There will still be an opportunity if you want to come to the SSA dinner at the Metro Centre next to StoneX, where I will be interviewing a number of players and throwing questions open to the floor. Brilliant, fantastic. Well, that's something to look forward to as well. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll say all the best and speak to you next week.
Bye.
This is the Fezcast.